Welcome, everybody. I am RJ Carter, the guy here at Critical Blast. I don't know what my title is anymore. I used to. It doesn't mean anything. The paycheck's the same. And we are here tonight with yet another comic book crowdfunder. We're going to talk with Chibi Mike and head back into the days of the old West, where we will be exploring the world of Deepwell. Mike, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. So this is an ongoing Indiegogo now, or is this wrapping up? Where are we at on this?
We just cleared the first week, so we have about 22 days left, I think.
A lot of time left to go, and how far have we gotten percentage wise into getting
We
this thing
are,
going?
I believe we're at 27. Yeah, we're at 27%. 22 days left, and just shy of 40 backers.
Okay, well that's good. I mean, 25% basically done, and 25% of the time gone. That's on track. It'll, like they say, it always peters off in the middle and then spikes back up again at the end. Uh, but you know, I think your goal is fairly achievable too. It's not a you're not got an exorbitant goal set on the thing.
Yeah. So this is our third major campaign now, and it's kind of following the cycle that we see with a lot of our projects, where we have a really great push at the start, and then we hit that dreaded middle slump, and then towards 12 days or so left, that's when things really start ramping up again.
Yeah, that middle slump. I think that's where everybody starts throwing the stretch goals in, so they can keep the excitement going.
Yeah. And I learned from my last campaign not to throw too many of those out there, because if you throw too many stretch goals and too many bonuses, we're getting ready to actually start fulfillment on our second campaign by the end of August, and man, that's going to be a lot of work with all the bonuses that we got coming out to people. So
Yeah,
we're
going backwards
we're
with bonuses.
yeah, so we're trying to at least, until we hit funding, we're trying to keep Deepwell lean and mean.
All right. So, what's Deepwell about? I mean, I can tell from the pictures this is going to be like an old west thing, but that doesn't mean there's not going to be some twists in it that are either supernatural or sci-fi or straight on western style. Take us into the story and tell us what's going on in there.
Yeah. So, I usually like giving the elevator pitch, because that kind of gets across in one short sentence what the whole thing is, and then I'll go a bit more in depth. So, the elevator pitch is what happened the day the Lone Ranger rode into Deadwood. The longer pitch is it's the story of the Block family, who run Deepwell behind the scenes with an iron grip. They're evil, corrupt, and everyone lives in fear of their power and authority. One day, a masked vigilante, the Gray Devil, rides into town, and it's like adding fire to kerosene. He's dead set on taking down the blocks one by one, and nothing's going to get in his way until the job is done. Deepwell is one part grim family drama, one part superhero vigilante action story, and one part hyperviolent Western thriller. It's drawn by Rafael Dantas with colors by me. The base perk comes in at $15, and as I say with all of our campaigns, we'd love to have everyone listening come along for the ride. If you're into Deadwood, The Wild Bunch, Unforgiven, or the Tarantino westerns, this is the book for you.
Okay, so what kind of a departure is this from the previous campaigns you said you funded? Were they all Western, or because I've done zero research? I like to just fly by the seat of my pants on these kind of things.
No, it's all good, man. So yeah, we started about 2 years ago now. Our first project was Samurai and Dinosaurs, which was, I mean, it's pretty self-descriptive, but a meteorite crash lands on the outskirts of a small town in feudal Japan, and an elite group of samurai are dispatched to investigate it. And what they discover is a tear in time and space with dinosaurs pouring through. Um, our second project was called The Gods Fear Me, and that was kind of our love letter to Lovecraftian fiction and cyberpunk. It takes place 200 years after the fall of man, and we follow an android named Kedzie, who is programmed to fight the elder aliens who have invaded us and killed off 70% of mankind. And along her journeys, she discovers a young boy named Brian, and she has to decide at that point between following her programming, which is, just, protecting mankind, and in this case, it's boiled down to this young boy, or going off on a quest for revenge because she has recently lost an arm in combat, and she's become kind of enraged and desperate to track down the elder one that did this to her. So,
I remember that title.
Sorry, what's up?
I remember that title being advertised on Twitter.
Oh, cool. Yeah, we just shut down the in demand for that, I think about like 2 or 3 months ago now. And yeah, like by September, like we'll be heading into the fulfillment. So, in terms of like content and genre, we're kind of all over the place, and it just boils down to, like I've been saying this a lot lately. There's a quote from Guillermo del Toro where he says he's a glutton for entertainment, and I kind of like everything, and as a writer, I kind of want to explore as much as I can.
Okay. So in DEEPWELL,
Mhm.
which I'm assuming is a town built around a deep well.
Yeah, yeah. The founding of the town was based around. You'll see this in a flashback when the blocks are, journeying via caravan. They stop for lunch, and one of the children almost dies falling through this hole in the earth. And it turns out, it's a water source, and they decide that this is going to be the ground zero for building their town, and like things kind of spiral from there.
Oh yeah, you find a water source in the West, especially in the days of the Old West. That was the sign: you stop here and you live here.
Yeah, exactly.
What was that? The ranchers used to have a saying: says you argue about oil, you kill over water.
Right.
So, uh, so did you have any Western influences going into this thing? I mean, other than obviously the Lone Ranger, because you got your mass vigilante character.
Yeah, so obviously the two biggest ones were the Lone Ranger and Deadwood. Rewatching Deadwood a few years ago, the thing that just kind of stuck into my head while I was watching it is like, man, like what would the Lone Ranger do if he saw like kind of the corruption and the power plays and all the everything going on throughout the course of that series? And things kind of spiraled from there. But like once I kind of started crafting it and wanting to make it my own, it fast became apparent that I wanted the Gray Devil to kind of be an amalgamation of like all these classic pulp and Western heroes. So there's a bit of the Lone Ranger in there, but there's also a bit of the Shadow. There's also a bit of Hooded Justice. All of these characters from all these different legacies that kind of can be traced back to the pulps was kind of where his inspiration came from. And yeah, like in terms of tone, it's like everything I mentioned. There's a bit of Tombstone in there. There's a bit of Tarantino's westerns. There's a bit of the Wild Bunch in there. So like it's just kind of one big stew.
All right. Now, do the Block family have any relation to the Gray Devil's origin? I would assume he's got a mad on against them that they're his Joe Chill of a sort.
Exactly. Yeah. The Blocks and the Gray Devil are intimately connected, and the entire revenge narrative kind of spirals out from a single point of wrongdoing.
Okay. I'm going to assume that it's something very, very terrible, that he's going to want to kill them all or take them all down.
Yeah, I hate I hate doing the thing of like being too vague and nebulous, but like it really is kind of that thing of like at least the first book. Like once we get into the second book and you know who everyone is and where everything stands, there aren't going to really be, too many spoilers. But this first specific volume, it's revelation after revelation that kind of builds to this thing where we reveal who the Gray Devil is and why he's doing what he's doing.
Okay, so it's not just that we're seeing Batman roll into town here, and we know that, hey, every time Bruce Wayne's over here, he's listening in. We don't know who the Gray Devil is either, but we're probably seeing him throughout the book until the revelation is made, that kind of a thing.
Oh yeah, like you will know his identity on the very last page of the book, but he is kind of peppered throughout the entire thing, and also. The storytelling device that we're using for DEEPWELL is we're kind of doing time jumps, similar to like a Nolan story or a Tarantino story. But to help cut down on some of the confusion, each chapter break is going to be, it's going to contain a date at the top so that you understand when chronologically this scene is happening.
Okay, that's cool. What into the physicality of the book? How many pages are we looking at here? It's a one and done, I'm guessing, but it's something that can go on into further adventures.
Okay, so just like with the Gods Fear Me, our approach for the foreseeable future with our crowdfunding projects is each book is going to be standalone, but you can have a greater appreciation if like you read the entire thing. And again, like the Gods Fear Me, DEEPWELL is going to be 3 books in total, spread out over about 3 years, and then hopefully by year 4 we can put together a trade collecting the whole thing into 1 volume.
Okay, so you got probably 4 Indiegogos here. I assume you want to crowdfund the omnibus version of it.
Yeah, that's the plan.
And this is going to be how many pages is the first story? I mean, is it like a 40-page graphic novel on its own?
Volume 1's going to be 32 pages. We're hoping volume 2 can be 48. And, depending on, 2 years from now, like where the audience is at and, the popularity and demand for it, we're hoping that book 3 can come in at 60 pages.
Okay. Now, this is your third project. If you were to graph your 3 projects chronologically, what are you seeing an increasing success in funding, or is it kind of sort of holding out the same each time?
No, we've been really fortunate. So Samurai and Dinosaurs, by the time it closed, came in just shy of 10,000. And when we closed The Gods Fear Me, that ended at just shy of 14,000. So yeah, our audience is growing, and as long as that continues to be the case, we're happy to keep producing content for them.
So you would probably expect to see like a 15 to 16,000 with DEEPWELL. And the thing is, you're not even repeating the same kind of genre, so that people come in and say, oh yeah, I'm going to get more of this Project X that I was in before. I want to see more of that. They do that well. You went from Samurai to Deep Space to Old West. You jump around a lot.
Yeah, like I know with a lot of projects, like the meat and potatoes is the superhero genre, and I do have 1 or 2 very specific superhero stories in me, but like these initial projects that we've started with are kind of like where my heart is at creatively, and I wanted to get them out before like we like really focus and drill down into some of the superhero stuff.
So there are maybe superhero books planned for the future with Chibi Comics?
Yeah, again, like ultimately, since I'm just the writer on all these projects, it comes down to availability for certain artists that I want to work with. And so I can't say specifically like, oh, 2021 like is when this project is going to launch, or 2022 we'll do that. But relatively in the near future, like there should be something superhero related that we're gonna launch out there.
Okay. Now, how do you work with your artists in a crowdfunding scene? Is it a situation where, because there's different ways of doing it.
Hmm.
One is, if you're the writer, then you find an artist and you pay him, and then you try to crowdfund the book and hope you make your money back. And then, of course, there is the, hey, you're the artist, I'm the writer. Do you want to work with me as a co-partner on something?
Sure.
Uh, I'm seeing more of the former and not so much of the latter, unless the artist is also the writer and they're kicking off their own story.
Right. Well, so, like my day job along with my wife is we are freelance illustrators, designers, writers. So I understand from the artist point of view, like how much work it takes to like produce this content. And in the earlier days of our content, when we were of our company, when we were producing content for submissions, like I would work with artists who specifically, were willing to work reduced or for free, on the understanding that they would get paid on the back end. But moving forward into the crowdfunding space, I wanted to take a more, I don't want to say ethical, but maybe pragmatic approach of like, look, I'm going to pay you out of pocket for the preview material. So in this case, with DeepWell, I paid Raphael for the character designs, I paid for the cover, and I've paid for the first 2 pages of content.
Okay.
And that's kind of, I justify it as that's not only giving him work as a freelance illustrator, but it's also our marketing budget, because his work is what's going to help sell the book.
And so then after the funding, that would be when you would be able to pay him for the rest of the
Yeah,
work and produce the book. Okay, so you don't have to produce the whole book up front. Some people do that and then hope that they can even recoup their losses and make some money.
yeah. So I mean, like that would be great. I mean, again, if we can get to a position where we keep building our audience and we hit the point where these goals are easily exceeded and we're left with a decent profit margin. I'd love to be in a position of like, hey, I'll pay you for 2/3 or even the entire book up front, and then whatever we get is what we get, and as long as we have enough to cover the printing, we're good. But for now, these campaigns are meant to be run really lean and efficient, and it really is, this percentage is, for my artists so that they can produce the content, and the rest of the budget pretty much goes into printing and shipping.
And how do you handle the shipping? Are you packing it all up in your own house, or do you have a disbursement agency handling that?
No, it's all us. Like especially because we're still in the like growing our company phase of things. Like these print runs aren't so huge and vast that like we can't handle it on our own. I'm sure by the time we get to like John Malin or Ethan Van Sciver numbers, like fingers crossed. At that point, obviously, we're gonna have to go through like a fulfillment center. But as long as we can do it on our own, like that's one less expense, and it also helps because when you have like 2 or 3 or even 4 people involved in the process of getting a book to somebody, there's that much more room for error. And when that person writes to you and is like, hey, I never got my book, where is it? It's like, well, I don't know, because I wasn't the one that personally packed and shipped it out.
Well, Richard Myers got the historical stories of his first shipments out where he worked with a fulfillment agency, and people were getting damaged books because they were being like sent out in bubble wrap mailers.
Exactly.
They didn't know what they were shipping out.
Right, and then the horror story with that stealing solo book.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
They just didn't they just like put a stamp and a sticker on the back cover and out
Yeah,
it went? Like,
man, they just treated it like a magazine. I'm like, man, like I know this isn't necessarily on you, dude, but these people don't even understand what comic books are.
yeah, that was that. I want to get a copy of that just because of the history that goes with it. The story is a great one behind it. So look how they screwed this
Right,
up.
right, right. Yeah.
But
So
you
it's
know,
it's been good.
I was on the
So
stream earlier this week with Billy Tucci, and the whole
mhm.
time I was streaming, he's bagging up all the stretch goal stuff for his last project with She Way of the Warrior, and you know, so even the bigger guys who are making more bank with their projects are still wanting that hands-on. Don't make my comic book all bent up business. Shipping it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's I'm not gonna lie, like, as a creative person, like I'd much rather be like, writing or drawing or, like planning like the next campaign. But, what we learned on fulfillment for Samurai was there is this kind of rewarding feeling of like having a giant stack of Gemini mailers and like, carting them over to the post office and loading them all up. Like there is something rewarding in that, and it's a lot of work, but I do kind of look forward to it now in a weird way.
And I can understand that. I look forward to mindless work. Um,
Sure.
like, here, take this, put it with this, put it with this, shove it in here, close it up, stack it up,
Right.
repeat. Because I'm a writer as well, and when I get to do things like mow the lawn, stack envelopes, that's when I'm thinking in the back of my head, about the next story to keep myself entertained, if anything else. But you can let your mind wander and still be feeling productive. And like you said, look at the end of it, and you see the stack of thing that, oh, I just did this. Now I'm taking it out and mailing it.
Right.
Above and beyond knowing that you didn't damage everything on the way while packing
Yeah,
it up.
and then ultimately, like, once you start getting messages and photos of people getting their books, like that's when like the big fulfillment comes in of like, oh wow, okay, like, like not only did this hard work equate to like the good feeling of like dropping them all off, but now I get, the double good feeling of like seeing people happy that they're getting their stuff and knowing that it came directly from me as opposed to like a fulfillment plant or whatever.
Exactly. And of course, you've just doxed your home address or whatever it is.
Oh
All
no,
that.
yeah. So like, like I always tell people like depending on where you live, get your PO box early. A, so that you don't dox your home address, and B, like where I'm based, for whatever reason, maybe it was just a time of the year thing. I had to go to like three different locations before I was able to lock down a post office box. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, get
Yeah.
get that early.
Did you go to an actual post office box, or did you one of those like mailboxes, etc., where you got a street address so you can
Um,
receive?
I started at our local post office, which is like 5 minutes away from my house, and they were all booked up. So then we went to a postal annex, and they weren't booked up, but like what they wanted just for like 6 months of shelf space was ridiculous. So we had to go to a town that is maybe 25 minutes away from us. And that's so technically, if you send something to our PO box, it's going to like a town that's nowhere near Portland.
Yeah, I lived in North Carolina once, and I had to drive 10 miles to a post office, and then I would mail things. I would mail my bills there, and then I would get notices later on that they were like 2 weeks late. I was like, I mailed this thing with plenty of time. I went and complained, and it was Mayberry was the big city to where this post office was, and they're like, well, yeah, we send it out, but we don't have the truck come until we've got 100 pounds of mail. I'm like, understood. I'm finding another post office.
Exactly.
So, um, something I was going to ask you, Chibi Comics.
Hmm.
Uh, when you mentioned the Gods Fear Me, I do remember seeing the art on that. I obviously didn't see the art on Samurai and Dinosaurs, and I've seen the art on uh, Deepwell,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, Deepwell. There's not a chibi in there.
No. So okay. Our company, so technically our company has existed since 2005, which was a year into Selena and I, that's my wife. That was a year into our relationship and a year into us deciding that, comics is what we wanted to do with the rest of our lives. And at the time, we were based in Chicago, and Selena had a cat that was named Chibi, and so like that's why if you look at our logo, like it's this little black cat face. So it's not. We know the confusion, but like we thought it kind of worked because originally we were just putting out like ash cans and mini comics, so they kind of were tiny comics in a way, but at a certain point, it just became like, well, we're not going to rebrand ourselves, so we just got to kind of ride this out and make it work.
Well, you can always try to work it in somehow. Like always have a pin up of all the characters in chibi format or something.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Hopefully between next year or 2022 at the latest, we're going to try to produce something with Selena on art, and she loves doing chibi stuff, so I'm sure that'll kind of be our big breakout actual chibi book.
All right. You've had a couple of different artists working with you now. How do you go about recruiting artists? I mean, when you knew you wanted to do DEEPWELL, what did you just start Googling Old West comics or something and see whose art struck you and then start reaching out to them?
Well, so DEEPWELL's been kind of like a frustrating at times journey to like get it actually into production. So before Raphael, we had two different artists lined up for the book, and like I was when they both came into the picture, I was still The Gods Fear Me was still in demand, and it was too close to us wrapping that up. Like I didn't feel comfortable, like while that was still in demand, being like, "Hey, we're going to start crowdfunding another book." And those two artists, like they couldn't wait the amount of time. Like just schedules didn't work out.
Yeah.
And so like thankfully at that point, like Raphael came into the picture, and he was kind of in my head like what I envisioned for the book anyway, so it kind of worked itself out. But like to answer the question specifically, so in the case of Samurai and Dinosaurs, the artist on that was Sergio Calvé, and we had worked together since the early 2000s off and on a bunch of projects for submission. And like he just kind of felt like the artist for me. And like we talked about his style, and if he could tweak things here and there to make it feel more like you were looking at like Japanese scroll art. And he did, and he tweaked some stuff, and it worked. So there was kind of no looking around in that case. And with The Gods Fear Me, I read a book from Alterna called Trespasser. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I've heard of most of the alternate books. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, Trespasser to this day is one of my favorites from them, and I was immediately struck by Kristen's art. It was bold. It had that kind of Eduardo Risso, Frank Miller, like leaning on like heavy shadow and heavy inks, like, and there was just something about it where I was like, I want to see this dude draw science fiction stuff. And like I talked to Peter Samedi, and he said, well, Kristen's always looking for work, so he put me in touch with him, and that was kind of that. Luckily, I mean, like when we jumped into crowdfunding, I had a very short list of creators that I would someday like to work with, and Kristen was like top 3. So out the gate to be working with him on the second project was crazy.
Okay. Being a writer myself who can't draw a straight stick figure,
Okay.
I'm sure there are other writers out there who would like to get into crowdfunding, but
Mhm.
would need to get an artist. What would be your recommendation to them for startup capital, without getting into specific page rates for the artists that you've worked with?
Sure.
Apparently, that's a touchy subject for a lot of people. What would you say? Hey, you need to have X amount of dollars set aside to invest before you can even think about opening your Indiegogo page.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, the whole page rate thing, it's like it can be a touchy and delicate subject to kind of tiptoe around because, like again, speaking as a freelancer myself, sometimes you take into account the offer that's being made and who it's coming from. So like if I get an offer to work on a comic proposal for writer X and he's just a dude with a day job, well, like depending on how busy my schedule is, I might, like give him an offer that's far lower than, like, let's say if like I did a greeting card design for Hallmark. Like that's obviously going to be way more pricey. So like artists tend to be protective of that stuff, because if like one figure gets out into the wild, then everyone's going to come at that artist and expect that figure, when it's like, well, no, it doesn't work that way for everybody.
Right. It's not a perfect basis. That makes sense.
Yeah. So as far as like capital and like reaching out to artists and stuff, what's great about kind of the indie scene and Comicsgate and just this whole thing that we're in the middle of, what's great is it is so easy to find an artist. Like just start following somebody who is an artist or is a writer, and you're just going to naturally start stumbling onto other people. Now, as far as capital, I mean, it is what it is. Like if
Keeping
you have
in mind also that the capital needs to be able to cover your printing cost, and you have to find a printer. And
oh yeah, for sure. Okay, so first and foremost, like I know a lot of like first time creators like want their book to be like a magnum opus, and it's like 60, 80, 120 pages. Don't do that. Like if something's going to be your first book, like do 22 to 32 pages, because you're going to see like when you factor in your artist's page rate, and like like if the artist just handles pencils and inks, and you're going to do a full color book, you got to hire a colorist, and then you got to hire a letterer, so all of these fees start to add up way faster than you think that they would, even if you have like a more higher budget of like 30 to 40,000. Like that money can still go really fast. So start small, find an artist who's willing to do the work for a reasonable rate. I mean, you don't want them undercutting themselves. You want them to be able to like make a living off of this work that you're offering them. And when you set your budget, expect that you're not going to make any profit off of it. I see a lot of people, like even some of the bigger creators, like they kind of get this thing of like, well, it's funded and I can do X amount of stuff with all this money. And it's like, no, like that money's not yours, and it's going to go really quick.
Yeah.
So yeah, like,
I mean, a lot of comics that are out there that get funded at like $1,200, $3,000. I'm like, I can't even imagine the artist not having charged $6,000 for 22 pages.
Right. Yeah, I have to imagine with some of those smaller campaigns, like they're literally just working for the printing and shipping, and they're just either they are the artist and they're just drawing it for free, or they have paid a separate artist out of their own pockets, and that's just not a part of their budgets.
Well, like I said, I'm experienced with writing. I'm currently the author on the Destroyer series, so
yes,
Remo Williams. But I've always had I've had a couple of fantasy novels in my head that I'm starting to wonder if they wouldn't translate better as graphic novels. Last time I tried to write a comic book, there was 20 years ago. There was a publisher who was starting up. He wanted stories. I'm like, well, okay, here's mine, and I wrote it out, panels by books by pages. And he had an artist in Nepal by the name of Rajiv Golay, who did wonderful stuff. This Marvel Tryout stuff looked like it was Marvel publishable.
Sure.
And he did some quick character sketches of my team, and I was like, yes, I like this guy. Uh, and then it came to the point of, okay, I need money, and the blue backer boards, I guess they were going to send him the boards to draw it on, and that's where it all kind of came to a screeching halt. I was like,
Right,
well,
right.
I'm glad I wrote 3 issues of a 6-issue series that will never see print.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of why, like, we here at Chibi are kind of sticking to this formula. It's working for us, and hopefully it's something little by little we can, build off of, because the investment of paying out of pocket for an artist to draw a book from start to finish, like, that's a huge undertaking unless you have funds to work with. And I mean, as freelancers, both me and my wife, like, we don't have those extra funds. So it really is this thing of like, hey, like, here is a couple pages of sequential art. Here's the cover, and I'm going to talk to you about the premise of the book a little bit. If you, as a potential backer, think that this is something that's worth your time and money, we'd love to have you along for the ride. And otherwise, like, if the crowdfunder doesn't fund, like, that book never exists. And
Yeah.
it may seem harsh, but like, when you look at even like the image model, where you've had people like Donald DeLay say that he produced 4 issues worth of content and then put out a trade, and he walked away with a check for $500. I mean, it's a better opportunity for everyone involved than risking a situation like that in the mainstream.
Right. But again, it's still, there's still risk involved depending on how much you want to invest up front with an artist.
Sure.
I would, it would be a nightmare for me to pay for a 22-page book and then do a crowdfund on it and be, a crowdfunding nobody that nobody, it doesn't fund. And then you find out that, well, okay, I've already paid for this book. I've got the pages. Do I say that it funded at $600 and just eat it all and have it published, or do I, fund it again, or do I just say, well, it was a nice dream. Let's go back to, writing code for a living or something.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, like, there, I guess you kind of gotta, you just kind of you have to jump into the deep end and, like, push yourself and your product as much as you can. And hopefully the audience will find you. What helps is having an established audience built up, be it YouTube or Twitter, or hopefully both.
Yeah.
We're working exactly. I am too. Like, my Twitter base isn't bad, and it's growing. YouTube is a completely different beast, and it's one that I'm working hard on, but having some trouble with. So yeah, you have to have something of a built-in audience before you just launch something into the wild, because when you're launching something into the wild with kind of no one out there that knows who you are, you're kind of just hoping that this huge collection of strangers will all discover your work at the same time and all feel the exact same way about it. And it's not impossible, but that's a way tougher road than building up your audience beforehand.
Absolutely. And is that we've been building this audience for 2 years now, and we're just about to crack 1,000 viewers. So
yeah, man, congratulations. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah, we've gone from being monetized by YouTube to YouTube changing the rules to the long uphill slog to getting 1,000. Now all we got to do is get 3,000 more hours of watched material. So
right,
we're putting stuff out to be seen.
Yeah, fingers crossed, man.
All right, so for all those catching the replay, the description for DEEPWELL is in the link. I used to be able to talk for a living. I was a Toastmaster, crying out loud. The link for the description to back DEEPWELL on Indiegogo is below. We encourage you to click on that, get out there and back this. If you want some old-fashioned spaghetti western action with vigilantes and bad guys. It looks like you've got, the pretty ladies in hoop dresses and the nice mustachioed gentle townspeople in there as well. So if you're looking at the key art for this video, understand that is not the key art for DeepWell. That is me putting their characters on something old westy looking. So don't look at that and say yuck, because that is not representative of the book, just the video, guys. But Mike, it's been a pleasure having you on here. And as you get closer to funding, if you want to come back on the last couple of days here and see if we can't do something to boost it up to the end there or push it further along. What kind of, you said you're going to keep it lean and mean and everything as far as the stretch goals go, but do you have any stretch goals in mind that you might do with a Western themed kind of book?
Oh yeah. I mean, we got plans for stretch goals. At 8,000, there may be a poster potentially involving some other, let's just say some other Western characters from independent publishing. That would probably be first. And yeah, like we'll see where we go from there. Like I've got stuff in mind, but right now my main focus is like, look, let's hit 6K so that I can pay Raphael and get him drawing this thing, and then we'll start talking about extras.
All right, and 6K that's the funded goal, or is that okay? So 6K is funded, 25% of the way there, 25% of the way into the campaign. This is something that's eminently fundable, and it's something that I think is needed too. We need multiple genres to exist out there so that we don't all get tired of the same humanoid creature / superhero working out there in crowdfunding land. We don't have very many Westerns out there. Dynamite has shown that there is an appetite for the Western comic with, their, I think they do Lone Ranger, and they've certainly done other ones, but get out there and let's get DeepWell dug.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks so much for having me again.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. And we will go ahead and close this stream out.